I would argue he's the greatest preacher to ever sit on the throne of Peter other than Gregory the Great. I think that's how good. And the thing about, go back to the great tradition, when we talk about preachers, we're not talking about flamboyant, charismatic people. We're talking about people who are able to transmit the gospel effectively. Like John Henry Newman was a great preacher, but if you went and listened to him, he would have bored you to death.
Yeah.
He read his sermons, right? They were written out, but historically, he's one of the great preachers in the Latin West for the last 500 years, right? That's the depth of Ratzinger, and that's just one element of him, but his actual theological competence. I don't know when you would go back to a bishop of Rome with his, maybe Leo the Great, at least as far as his influence. He wrote the Tome of Leo, which led to the Chalcedonian definition of the hypostatic union. That's how great Ratzinger is, as far as a mind. Cardinal Pell, who just died, a great man, falsely accused of sexual misconduct, spent 400 days in jail, and ironically dies a week after. Benedict said, he's just the smartest man I ever met. He says, the thing about Benedict, it wasn't like he was just smart in one area. He was smarter than you in every area. He spoke all these languages, right? He knew Greek philosophy, and he knew the East, like, incredible depth, and just love for the Eastern Fathers. Lancelot Andrews, he could talk to you for hours about Lancelot Andrews, the Anglican Bishop of Winchester, and just this tremendous grasp of philosophy and history. And he lived through the crap of all of the Nazism and all of this stuff. He's just, that piece of him is, he doesn't have in the West a parallel.
His intellect is always what struck me most, and I'll admit I hadn't really spent much time with him, so to speak, until the last few years when the group that I was in started reading through his work, Jesus of Nazareth, and yeah, he was just the smartest person that I've ever read at the time, and his knowledge is inexhaustible. I read so much about him after he died, so many articles that were written, and one of the things that was put up, I think, on First Things was commenting on his languages, like you said, that if you were English, when he spoke to you, was speaking in paragraphs in his fifth or sixth language, so he wasn't even using his native tongue to extol the greatness of the glories of Christ, and I think that's really what I've heard and what I've seen is the crowning achievement, as he would put it, of his ministry, that, again, with this book, that he wanted to discover and share the true nature, the person of Christ as the face of God.
Yeah, that 3-volume series on Jesus is so Ratzinger, right? Here he is. He could be the headiest guy in the world if you wanted to, but he wasn't. And for him, faith in Jesus is simple. Jesus is Lord. That's the thing about Ratzinger. It wasn't like, he didn't write books like Rowan Williams to try to tell you how smart he was, right? He wrote books because he wants to draw you to Christ. And he was a humble guy. He was egoless in many ways. He was this humble guy.
Yeah.
And he was deeply concerned about separated Christians. And two things that strike me. I remember watching this. It was Benedict who brought the relics back to Constantinople that had been taken by the Crusaders, which was a big, big deal. The Vatican had them for 700 years or something like that.
It was
1,000 years. And there were conservative voices in the Curia that didn't want him to do that.
Yeah.
Tremendous act of charity, right? So he goes the Patriarch Constantinople, who lives as a prisoner of the Turks, in this, compared to the Vatican, this little tiny place.
Yeah, Fanar is nothing.
Yeah.
impressive.
Right. And
It's nicer than my house, but, you know.
yeah, and if you can YouTube that. There's just such a love and general sincerity to that he didn't go in there wearing a papal tiara and being triumphant, right? And then his establishment of the Anglican Ordinariate, which is the most significant piece of ecumenical accomplishment since the Reformation. But it's only he could do it. Nobody else could have pulled that off, you know, and nobody would have had the foresight and the ability and the desire to do it. And so there won't be another Joseph Ratzinger. I just don't see it happening. I mean, and I think Francis isn't my cup of tea theologically and a whole bunch of other things sociologically. But it's an enviable task to come after. John Paul II was a great philosopher. That was his great strength. He was another guy, right? Polish. He went through the war. He survived all kinds of things. Tremendous intellect. But really, Ratzinger shadow wrote much of his own encyclicals, right? Ratzinger wrote the Catechism. I mean, John Paul gets credit for it, but Ratzinger was a level above John Paul II in the theology. Philosophically, they were probably on a par. It's hard to speak enough about this guy's acumen that way.
Yeah.